Hello, we're John and Elizabeth. We're on board Corrick.
Hello.
We're just exiting Loch Sunart, and we've had a little bit of a change of plan. We're a bit further north than we anticipated. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Well, we've been having a lot of fun going to places that we haven't been to before. When you read the guidance, it all looks very daunting, and then you chat to people who are local and they say it's not quite as daunting as it sounds, just dodge a few rocks. So that's what we've been doing. But we have had a change of plan because, just need to avoid that. We originally knew that we wanted to be on the south coast for a week in the beginning of June, and from about 2 months out, where we were looking at it, Oban seemed like the natural place to transit south because of rail links and so forth. But actually, the more you look at it, Oban doesn't look perfect, certainly not for leaving for a week, and there are better places further north, so we've chosen one of those. And what that meant was that when we got to Crinan and we were looking at this plan in a bit more detail, we thought, oh, we've got not very many miles to go and 10 days to do it. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot to do in that space, but it took 10 days away from getting further north. So it looks like we're going to park the boat a little bit further north of the Ardnamurchan Peninsula. But that meant that we could get out of Crinan, head north, Huon Sound, Pouldoran, Loch Allen, Tobermory on a Saturday night.
Loch Sunart.
Loch Sunart, which was very lovely. You could spend a month in Loch Sunart easily. But we're now enjoying champagne sailing, 10-ish knots of breeze as we head out, just north, out into the Atlantic.
Out in the Atlantic, yeah. Ooh. Ooh.
Let's get on with some sailing.
Well, coming out of Crinan, you're a little bit spoiled for choice, but we decided to take the inside route into the Sound of Shuna, and then we were going to go through Huon Sound, go pick up an anchorage at Pouldoran before going to Loch Allen. Huon Sound is quite interesting, very narrow, but we hit it just at reasonably slack water and in no wind at all. But it was really quite surprising, even in those very benign conditions, the degree to which the boat would suddenly be swung off its heading, and you need to correct it. But we came through there very cheerfully, very light. We got out and there was just a little bit of sailing, but we then had a very lovely anchorage in Loch Allen. Following day, we headed up towards Tobermory. Not a terribly long trip, but good fun nonetheless.
We reeled this gentleman in a little bit, and so long as we can get round these rocks marked by that green boy there, we'll be able to bear away to Tobermory. And literally 10 minutes later, what was 12-14 knots of breeze appears to be nothing. We have 0 on the clock. The tide is carrying us towards Tobermory at 1.5 knots. For some reason, our friend over there seems to have just a little bit of breeze, so we'll see if we can find it. And another 10 minutes later, the wind has shifted. It has gone slightly northwest, very much as predicted. Elizabeth, how do you think it's going?
Yeah, it's going quite well. After having gone round in circles.
We went round in circles for a little while, but we're now back up to 12 knots apparent, just off close hold, nearly 6 knots through the water, 6.5 over the ground.
It's a race to Tobermory.
Race to Tobermory. The people we were to get the people we thought we were racing have overtaken us. But looks like it's going light for them up ahead, so we'll see how we get on.
Arrived in Tobermory, it was all go. Ferries coming and going, lifeboats out exercising, and once again we saw the Waverley, which was nice. The pontoons and pier at Tobermory are all very well run, and we were able to get bits and pieces, including some presents for some grandchildren. And we had a quiet night in Tobermory as the beautiful sunset happened. Getting ready for our next part of our trip, which was going to be into Loch Sunart. Now, Loch Sunart is new to me. It's a very long loch that goes east-west, and we got going there first thing. Well, our sail along Loch Sunart took us most of the day. It's reasonably east-west, but there are a few bends and a number of little passages round various bits and pieces. This is Risga Sound, where you travel down a narrow channel that can't be much more than 100-150 metres wide. You've got sheer-sided rocks on one side, but the depth is just absolutely enormous. I'd have to check to tell you exactly what it was, but there was no danger of any sort of problem. I'll show you the chart just now. Tiny little narrow passage. So we sailed through there. We had the wind from the north. Very fluky, but not strong at all. By the time we got down to the very far end of the loch, the wind was directly astern as we went, as we approached the next narrow little channel. So Elizabeth and I got rid of the mainsail and did that entirely on the headsail, very much with the idea that we wanted to avoid the risk of an inadvertent jibe just at a inappropriate or inconvenient moment in the gap. As I say, the wind was by this stage right behind us and flicking backwards and forwards. So we find that headsail only rig works really well, and actually we didn't lose very much speed at all. And as we approached the narrows, we were able to just sort of swing our way through supposedly quite strong tidal streams, but we again hit it just about right, I think. Didn't see very much, and there's a sort of tiny little slightly clumsy jibe here just at the end to head up and do the last 3 or 4 miles up towards Strontian, where we spent the night right at the head of the loch. When we arrived, it was a little bit breezy, and we'd originally intended to sort of potter ashore, but by the time we got there, we'd been on the go pretty much most of the day, and it was looking a bit wet in the dinghy, so we decided not to bother. Fortunately, by the time we got up in the morning, it was absolutely glorious, completely flat, calm, and we got going and headed back the other way, and got an opportunity to do a bit of sail trimming, handling, up the loch, and we got to Salem, which wasn't very far away, and took a mooring buoy there. We took a mooring buoy at Salem, and the team there could not have been more helpful. Pointed us in the direction of a local hotel. They had just about everything we needed. Got gas without any difficulty, got alongside the following morning to get all watered up. And it's a very, very lovely spot and highly recommended. But the next part of the trip was to go from Loch Sunart to Col, and this was to go out north of Mull and into the Atlantic, as we talked about earlier. And it was a bit light to start with, but the breeze kicked in later on in the afternoon. So this is probably about 4 o'clock. Light northwesterly breeze, full sail up. And we were doing, our overall speed wasn't great, but towards the end we were getting a good 5.5, 6 knots as we headed towards Col, which you can see in the horizon there.
We're on the Isle of Col, and
with the beautiful sandy beaches,
turquoisey seas, and behind us a couple of castles. We've been spotting castles all the way along, but they've always been a bit too far away to have a look at. These two are under restoration, and we've been whizzing round Col on e-bikes.
E-bikes, which are really good. Takes the effort out going up a hill.
Bit of a revelation, I have to say. Really nice.
And we've seen some really interesting wildlife.
Yep.
Minke whale.
Minke whale, 2 minke whales yesterday.
Yeah, they came up and said hello.
And we've had lapwings and
Terns.
corn crakes and little terns. It's such a shame that we're going to have to return the bikes in a minute.
Yeah.
So
But this is a far cry from the southeast of England.
Isn't
On a
it
day like
just-
this, everybody would be packed into the
I'm
beach.
just going to do the background. So behind us, one castle, then another castle in the background, and as we sweep round the back of the bay, there's another farmyard there.
What about that beach?
It's very pretty. Let's go all the way round and sweeping all the way round and again and again and again, and then we have the bay, the sandy beach behind us. Really very lovely indeed.
What else would you want?
Right, let's go and do
Do the bikes.
35, 40 kilometres an hour on those bikes,
Yeah, brilliant.
even uphill. It's great.
Both of these castles sit right at the head of a loch to the south of Col, and I was keen to revisit the place as I had come here a few years ago and had a barbecue on the beach. It was very pleasant. But we continued our cycle journey, including visiting the graveyards, some very poignant gravestones there of unknown sailors who had washed up during 1940. But we returned to Col itself, had something to eat on the hotel, complete with a helipad, and we got showers and so forth in the community centre. And this is the bar in the community centre, which is very lovely, very ornate, and those are the castles engraved into the bar itself. It is a fabulous piece of work. If I can just add a cautionary tale, we came ashore and tied up our dinghy, expecting to only be ashore for an hour or two, then hired the bikes, then disappeared for the day, and we had unfortunately tied onto the very bottom ring that you can see right at the top, and I got a little bit wet. Not a mistake you would want to make in the Channel Islands, but with a range of about 2 meters at the moment, it wasn't a catastrophe, but didn't really think that one through. We had a terrific time on Col, but the getting north was starting to get important, so we set off against a northerly breeze, it has to be said.
Well, we're currently beating northwards towards the island of Muck, which will be our first port of call round the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, round Ardnamurchan Head. This is this is quite a lot off the beaten track for us, and Elizabeth and I had a bit of a conversation about charts and so forth, and I've just procured some new charts, and Elizabeth sort of said, why do you need new charts? You've got the chart plotter, you've got the chart plotter here, you've got the almanac here, we've got sailing directions and the companion to the sailing directions, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but I thought I'd just talk about what we've got, why it's working, and why we felt the need to augment it. I'm afraid there's a terrible flicker on the chart plotter when I show it on the GoPro, so I'll augment this with some screenshots from the phone. But there is a lot of stuff inside this chart plotter. When we first fitted the boat out, we had the chart plotter with a set of Navionics charts, we had the Reed's almanac, and we had a set of charts as well. Now, I don't really want to get into the whole legal position of charts, chart plotters and paper, but we have both and we're comfortable with both. So we have tidal diamonds in here, and they show up, and that's very helpful. If we click on them, it tells you which one it is, and then it gives you the directions for the next few hours. The coverage of the tidal stream diamonds isn't immediately obvious, but there is a way of finding them, because, and I found this button only the other day, button down at the bottom, more options, and then find nearest, gives you the ability to find, and to be honest, the most useful bits of these is tides and currents. Businesses hasn't been terribly useful so far, neither has lakes. But it does give you a really good printout of the heights of tides and the streams. One of the other things I'm finding here is there are some hidden warnings. Not as many as there are in the sailing directions or in the companions, but having them close to hand is very handy. So if we look here at Lauderdale Narrows, it says tidal streams and then see note, and what happens is as you zoom in, you have to look for it a little bit, but you get, and sometimes the rendering isn't brilliant, but you get a little bit of information about the tidal streams there. And you know, Lauderdale Narrows, spring tide incoming 3 knots. We were at Neeps, and actually we picked exactly the right time, so we had not very much tide there at all, but knowing that some of that information was immediately to hand was very helpful. When we were, and this is the first time I'd seen this, in Lam Lash, I noticed on my chart there was a little box showing another layer of charting detail, and it said Antares charts, and I hadn't come across these guys before, and I'll put their website up. It looks like a very worthwhile project, but what I think they're saying is so many of the surveys were done such a long time ago, and this fits in with an earlier episode where we talked about the quality of the survey information. Such a long time ago, maybe predating GPS, maybe using slightly different, forgotten the word, datums, yeah. And therefore, although the shape of what's happening is right, exact positions are not. And so these guys, as a group of enthusiastic amateurs, and that's their language, have charted a number of the west coast harbours. So for the princely sum of 20 quid, we have downloaded those, and we're going to give them a bit of a try. But we had a look at 2 of the places that we'd been to and compared our track with the experience, and so far on a sample of not very many, it's looking pretty impressive. And so we'll try that out, particularly as we start going to places where our chart coverage doesn't give the right sort of, or certainly doesn't give a comparable level of detail, and we'll see how we go. So I'm looking forward to that when we get to Moidart and Arisaig, for example. Yeah, love charts. There's a huge amount of information in them, and they're so lovely. I love it when they put them up in hotels and bars where you can see where you've been whilst savouring a glass of something. The other thing that I'm finding with these chart plotters is that the quality of where things are marked is really good. This is a little bit of a track of us heading up around Duart Point, and I'll show you the castle in a second. But we were against the tide and beating. It was a reasonably long day, but it was either that or arrive even later. And we managed to stay out of the way of the overfalls very much by following where they were marked on the chart, and it was pretty blinking accurate. We could see overfalls a few hundred yards ahead of us, exactly where the markings were. We put the tack in, and it just kept the boat a little bit more upright, and kept our boat speed up, which was good. In addition to the plotter and phone, I've got a little nav system called Navlink UK on there, and it was just the idea of having another source of plotting. And then when I bought the IMRAE charts, the paper charts, it came with a subscription to IMRAE charts that I have on the iPad. And what I do find that useful for is when I'm not on the boat, when I don't have the charts to hand, when I don't have the plotter immediately to hand, the IMRAY chart on the iPad is very helpful indeed for planning. And I like the look of the IMRAY charts. I find them very easy to read. Yeah, and they've also got a very nice, the ability to see the whole world very quickly, but also to zoom in, and that has different resolutions. So there's tiny little more detailed plans inside certain places. So I'm going to take a photograph, I think, of, I'll take a screenshot here of Tobermory, and Tobermory appears on one chart at one scale, and then on the inside it's the same scale, but actually all the detail is much smaller, and therefore when you zoom in, you get a lot more detail. Yeah, it's nice. I don't know that I'm going to stay with this setup for the whole time. It's working, but I now seem to have Navionics, Navlink, IMRAY, and Antares, and they all do slightly different jobs, but I don't know in my own head if I shouldn't rationalise this a little bit. But that is a conversation for over the winter, I think. I'm going to live with it. I'm going to use it as it is for the rest of this season, I think. Came out of Cole and the wind was absolutely right on the nose, so we tacked back and forwards, and that was fine, but it was beginning to look like a bit of a long day. Then the wind completely died.
Yeah, now it's shifting again.
Well, the wind completely died. We had some dolphins.
Yeah.
A few gannets, and then about 10 minutes later the wind filled in and has lifted us right onto the ley line to get to Muck, and it's 3 miles away.
Better get myself prepared.
Better get prepared.